My name is Dr. Hannah Rose Murray. I am a historian based at the University of Edinburgh, and I nominated William and Ellen Craft.
Did you find it a relatively straightforward process in starting that nomination process as such?
Yeah, and English Heritage were actually very good. So one of the first things I did was to check whether they had been nominated by English Heritage before, or if there was a plaque to them already. And then I think I emailed, this is probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, delays because of COVID, obviously. So I emailed, there's the email address on the website, and just said, can I just double check that no one, you're not in the process of nominating or putting a plaque up to this person? And, if not, here's a short paragraph about why you definitely should, they're amazing. And then I had a reply basically saying, no, go for it as such. Like, if you can find, a building and obviously have some historical evidence to back that up, and then obviously the process where they become involved, and as I mentioned earlier, having their own historians to really do the groundwork in terms of that historical evidence in terms of, with the building, for sure.
Whether you found the team to be encouraging and receptive of your suggestion, but from what you said, it sounds like they were really keen for you to kind of go along with it and work with you to nominate them.
I did, yeah, they were great. And I have a tendency to get too excited and too passionate about it. And Howard Spencer, who is one of the senior historians and who I worked most closely with, he was like, okay, I'm supposed to do one person at a time, or one plaque at a time, quite rightly. But no, they were great. Very much like a collaboration and partnership throughout, although because of COVID and because of the sheer number of plaques and research and backlogs, there were quite a few months would go by where you didn't necessarily hear anything, but obviously that was completely normal.
In terms of when you approached them, they said, yeah, let's go with it, we like this suggestion. Do you think that, given your kind of academic background, would you say that encouraged it to be more of like a team effort between you and the plaques, and that if you'd been another job and weren't skilled in the research arena, that they would have taken it on for you? Or do you think there was like a requirement that if you're nominating, you have to be able to do this level of research for them to take it on as such? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. It's a really good question, and my honest answer is I don't know. I think it helped because I'm a historian and I study and research William and Ellen Craft, particularly in Britain. Yeah. So I think that I would naturally be kept in the loop. Experience of working with Howard, and he's been really great. I think that if you were to nominate, if you as a group were to do that and said, and if you wanted to be kept in the loop, and if there was a question about, I don't know, her life, or again dates or anything like that, I think if you requested to be part of that loop, or please, if you have any questions, let's see if we can help. Let's see if that we can spend time to do that. Again, depending on time capacity, I think it does. It definitely helps because of my position, and just being open and honest and having that conversation with Frank, and also whether it's on the form or maybe that in that initial email that goes to English Heritage, in terms of that kind of formal process. Then just saying, okay, well, we're really excited to nominate in this person. We want to be as heavily involved as possible.
I mean, not all of us in our team are historically trained at all. But I mean, I, for one, did history at university as my undergrad. So I've kind of, I enjoy, I do a lot of family history. I enjoy spending hours on ancestry.com and finding things out and researching.
In English Heritage, and I haven't had this specific conversation with Howard, but he wouldn't be expecting everybody who nominated someone to be a historian, which, again, like I said, it's an advantage, but it's not a requirement, because it's driven by public interest and public demand. And if it were only historians who were nominating people, I think that would be a hideously boring and ridiculous position to be in, because you want people from all walks of life to try and nominate someone. And I think that, again, if it's difficult to find certain historical information, you've got, once you get to that point, you have trained historians to help you out at that point. But as you say, on the flip side, it's a really wonderful way, at least in these early stages, to get people interested in those sorts of historic avenues, and and finding out all those information and anecdotes and things like that. Because particularly through COVID, but also before COVID, there's a lot you can find out on the internet now, isn't there? which is really, really helpful. And like I said as well, I mean, yes, I'm a historian, but I've already said I wouldn't know the first thing about trying to consult certain maps to look at buildings, because I've never really had to do that before in that way. So again, I got very lucky. And you know, there was some information that I could find out online, and you know, and talk to Howard about it. But that should also be a hope for people, I think, because it's, you know, again, just because I'm a historian, it doesn't mean that I am an expert in every single aspect of.
It's that classic when you're playing,
or...
exactly. It's like when I'm playing Trivial Pursuit and the history question comes up, and they're like, "You did history at uni." I'm like, doesn't mean I know everything.
Yeah, precisely. A lot of it's a fun learning curve. You don't have to be a historian.
No, and actually, you made a good point there in saying, even if people feel it might, rather than putting them off the fact that, oh, you have to do research, it might actually show them that actually it can be quite fun. It can be quite fun searching on ancestry every now and then, and popping in, like, you can pop into an archive and just have a look. Like, it might show that it's not a scary thing to do or a boring thing to do. It can, if you generally have an interest in this historical figure, which I'm assuming you do because you want to nominate them, then actually it can be quite fun. Definitely.
And I think for a lot of people, sometimes even those who study history, you know, archives can be quite intimidating places if you haven't been to one, if you don't know how the process works, if you've been put off by a bad experience, you know, that can be a barrier. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be, because, you know, emailing up front and having a conversation about, you know, oh, we're trying to research this person, can you help? I mean, archivists and librarians, as I'm sure you know, like they're incredible, and they always want to help because that's their job. And again, you know, even though I'm a historian, like I sometimes don't know what I'm doing when I go into archives, so it's fine to ask and to sort of have that conversation with, okay, well, God, where do I start? When you walk in and go, oh, like, where do I find this thing, or how do I find this thing, or anything like that. So yeah, it's always a learning curve.
Yeah, because you do with archives, it is a bit like there's just so much, there's almost too much. And yeah, from experience, if you just ask the librarian or the archivist, suddenly every time I've done that, the amount of stuff I've got back in a good way it's just suddenly opened it up for me. I'm like, okay, wow, this is actually okay, I now know what I'm doing. But that moment of finding that nugget of information, or even just ancestry, typing in your person and finding a document straight away, seeing that document is so cool, because it brings them to life. And I suppose, if we can encourage one person and show one person that can be a really cool feeling, we'll have done our job, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
In terms of the process as a whole, what would you say were the main kind of obstacles and struggles that you came across in the whole process?
Yeah, so I think that overall, to start with, it's the building, and finding that link, and particularly in London, because you've just got such a diverse history of buildings, and London as a whole. You know, if you're looking at a building around Bishopsgate or Bank, it might have been destroyed by the Blitz, you know, during World War II, let alone just a church that has been taken down.
In the process of trying to find people to nominate, you kind of think they're so cool, and you kind of know they live in London, but it's trying to prove it, and either prove that they live there in like physical house number, but then also you've done that, and then I realized actually that house isn't there anymore. Like I have their address on a census record, and yet it's no longer there. And it's just like, okay, and that just kind of is really annoying. Yeah,
it's a real tough one, because, you know, while we're talking about the restrictions, one of the other figures that I'm studying at the moment and have done quite a lot of research on is a man called Moses Roper, who he was born into US chattel slavery in the early 19th century in 1815, and he traveled around London, but also everywhere around Britain, giving lectures in the late 1830s and the early 1840s. And he's really an extraordinary figure, and he's completely forgotten on this side of the Atlantic. He's completely forgotten where he was born. He was active in Canada as well, you know, such a really extraordinary figure. And I can't figure out where it's going to take a lot of research to pin down an address. And it's also I might find like, oh, okay, he stayed in a tavern for one night, but that might not be eligible for the criteria because he was only there for a night, as opposed to sort of a decent amount of time. There's those sorts of things to consider as well, isn't there? And you know, and outside London as well, I've got an address for him in Leeds, which, you know, that might help with the kind of local community plaque, but it's just
you've got the heritage ones, haven't you? But obviously they're restricted to London, and actually, why don't we nominate one for the Oxford Blue Plaque scheme or the Leeds, or whatever? There are blue plaque schemes around the country.
again, you know, if the option is more sort of you know is better in Oxford, then you know it's worth considering, isn't it? All options. It does require a lot of patience and work, and sometimes things don't necessarily work out the way that you want them to, and you have to think, okay, yeah, that address isn't going to work, I'm gonna have to try and find a different one in London, and to be sort of persistent with it, because as you say, if you're nominating someone, you want them to be nominated and you're passionate about them, and you want them to be recognized. So it's a matter of sort of going in with an open mind about what necessarily you'll find or where you can find. And I think, you know, again, this is no one's fault, but just COVID delays and things like that. And, you know, you want to be able to have a singing, songing, dancing, unveiling ceremony. Yeah, I think those are the main problems, and just, you know, being patient. I'm a very impatient person. I don't want to see the facts, you know, so, but again, that's no one's fault because of COVID delays and everything else. So
it's one of those weird processes, isn't it? In some ways it's really easy, and then in some ways it's you know, it's not.
I think even with we've touched on a little bit, but with the form itself, considering it's actually quite a small form. I think when I downloaded it, and I was expecting there to be some convoluted 10-page process, and I was like, oh my god, this is going to be really, really difficult. And it's not actually a long form. Like, one page is about necessarily the building, you know, just with sort of the very sort of fine details about it, and you know, what evidence have you got for them staying there, and you know, where is it, what is it, you know, etc., etc. And then you've essentially got a page about why this person should be nominated, and you know, there's a couple of boxes that are like 200-300 words or something like that, and it's obviously really hard to confine why this person should be nominated within such a small space. It's just more, god, what do I say? And you know, and to make that really passionate and, you know, completely irrefutable that this person is like, absolutely, this person deserves a plaque. When I was filling out the form, I was writing it with the I suppose with the confidence that you have to give a plaque to them, or like, what the hell is wrong with you? So which is, you know, it sounds a little bit arrogant, but it's just more like very like driven, like you cannot ignore these people. That's also going to win people over, because it's not only passion, but it's just like, no, why doesn't she have a plaque yet? You know, why, as you said earlier, like, why don't we know about her? Why isn't she like a household or a, you know, household name, or like in the national curriculum, or like anything like that?
I think that what we want to get across is that the nomination process itself, just getting that nomination in, shouldn't be something that is a barrier. That should be accessible to everyone. Is there anything you would say to someone who wants to has someone in mind they want to nominate? What is there anything you would say to them to either encourage them, or advice, or whatever it may be?
I think, just leading on from what you were saying before, just be passionate, and you already are going to be passionate about the fact that you've thought about someone and that you really want them to be honoured. And I think just Googling them and seeing what you can find out about them through a Google search, and then I think also like emailing English Heritage and sort of and asking them. And again, obviously they've got a backlog, they've got a very small team, but you know, they're welcoming people from all walks of life to try and nominate as many people as possible. So they are, you know, I think they would be very generous with their time and just say, oh, you know, perhaps try this and this. You know, if they've got time to kind of have that kind of dialogue, even if it's just an exchange of a couple of emails. Approaching other people as well, community activists, community historians, you know, academics, and actually just popping them an email and saying, oh, could you help me? You know, do you know of an address? Or do you know what I mean? And going down that angle as well, and just trying to make it a collaborative process as much as possible, but then also just not being afraid to ask people, because the majority of people, when they're asked, would just be, oh, you know, that's really exciting, you know, they'll be happy to help.
You can just, you know, write your nomination, write why you think you should do it, and leave it up to the panel. The more you know, you get into it and, you know, research, actually the more you're going to get out of it in the end, in the long run. But that's everything I've got. Thank you so much for giving us the time today.
You're so welcome. And it's a, you know, a joy to be able to help if I can. And
that's fabulous. Thank you so
much. Perfect. All right.